Let's see if I can help you better understand Python for loops. So let me create a list with, let's say, some names. Now assume that I want to go through the list with a for loop and print every name. Many beginners and even seasoned programmers will write something like this: for I in the range of the length of L, print L of I. Now this shows a gross misunderstanding of how for loops work in Python, because especially if you come from a background in other languages, what's happening here is that you are generating indices so that you can index into L. However, Python for loops, they are, I want to say, stronger than that. They are more useful than that. A for loop in Python looks like this. And you have to fill in these two gaps. And now, what you need to understand is what goes in here. If you really understand what can go in here, your for loops will be much more effective. And in fact, what goes in here is any iterable. So any iterable can go on the right. So what's an iterable? Notice that this word here, this is an adjective. So it's a quality. Some things are iterables and some things are not. For example, an integer is not an iterable because it has no notion of size. It's just one thing. Whereas, for example, the list I wrote before, this is an iterable because you can think of it as having a length, as having a dimension, right? You can start from the left and you can go over the elements in L. Another example of an iterable is a string. A string itself is an iterable. Why? Because it has a notion of length, of size, of dimension. You can start on the left and you can go over the characters. And so you can have these iterables on the right of a for loop. So you can write something like, for example, for ... in Rodrigo, and then do something. Now, the for loop is like a person that is going to take the iterable and is going to point at each item of the iterable at a turn, and is going to give it to you. And the way in which you accept the things that are being pointed at is by giving them a name. So for example, in here, the for loop will be pointing at characters, so maybe it makes sense to call this a character. So for each character in Rodrigo, what I can do is I can print the character. Notice my name is being printed here. So instead of having for I in range of length of the list, what we should have is for item in L. Why is that? Because the list itself is an iterable, so we can go over the items. We don't need to find the length, then create the range, then index into the list. We can just go over the items in the list. So this gives the exact same output. And so as soon as you understand that what goes on the right of the for loop is any iterable, so as soon as you really grasp what's going on here, you'll be set to understand more advanced tools to work with for loops. For example, two built-in functions that I love, which are zip and enumerate. And in order to be able to use these two effectively, you need to really understand that the things in here need to be iterables, and at the same time, any iterable can go on the right.